All right, so today we are picking up with the First World War. It's also called the Great War because there was no Second World War yet, so it was often referred to as the Great War. And the Great War doesn't just begin out of nowhere. There are a lot of underlying causes to how this war starts. So we're going to look at the long-term causes of what led into this war. The first is nationalism, and nationalism is a belief in one's country or promoting your country because you think it's the best. Now, a lot of times this can be seen as competitiveness or antagonism with other countries, that my country is better than your country kind of thing. We really see this like during Olympic times where we want to get the most medals, and so it's a much more competitive time period. But some great examples from this time period leading up to the Great War, France and Germany, they just don't get along. France had lost parts of its provinces to Germany during the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. And so they're constantly fighting back and forth over this little tiny chunk of land, two little tiny provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. Russia, who had been the guardian, or they had seen themselves, let me say, as the guardian of Europe's Slavic people, especially the Serbs, they are going to be rivals for influence over the Serbs with Austria-Hungary, over who's going to have the influence with this group of people. Poland is divided up between Germany and Austria and Austria-Hungary and Russia, and it wants to reunite itself and to become a country again. Czechoslovakia is the same as Poland. They all have this nationalism of my country needs to have this, my country deserves the best, and my country is the best, and the belief in your country. And that's going to be one of the long underlying causes of World War I. The second underlying cause or long-term cause is imperialism, and imperialism is where you own colonies. And you want to have colonies because that's great for you, because it supplies you with raw materials and you can make tons of money off of it. It's also a market for your goods, so you can sell stuff there and make money off that. It also adds to your prestige that, oh, look at all the colonies I have that you don't have, and I'm making money and you're not on all this land that I have. So it's a huge status symbol. But this idea of imperialism is going to lead to several fights with smaller wars taking place over these colonies as they're fighting each other. And so we get things like the Russo-Japanese War, where they're fighting over Pacific colonies. We're going to get the French and British conflicting over territory or colonies in Africa. So like I said, it's an underlying cause of World War I. The next is militarism, and militarism is where you are building up your military. Now, each nation wants their military to be stronger than their enemies. So if your enemy gets in advance or builds more tanks or whatever, you're going to build more. So it's in response. Now, the strongest army in the world at this time was Germany, but the strongest navy was Great Britain. And so Germany decides, well, Great Britain has a better navy than us, so we're going to build up our navy. Well, then Great Britain looks at what Germany's doing, saying, why are they building up their navy? They're going to get better than us. We can't have that happening. And so they build up their navy to make it even better. Germany sees what Great Britain's doing and says, we got to catch up with them. We need to make our navy just as good as theirs. And so it's just a back and forth until eventually you get to the point where, okay, we both have these really awesome navies, but how are you going to prove it? Well, the only way to prove that your navy is better than my navy is to shoot it out. And that's what's going to lead into a war. So the other nations are going to follow suit. It's not just Germany and Great Britain doing this. It's pretty much everybody in Europe is doing this. Everybody around the world is doing this. And that's what's going to lead into the the Great War. The fourth long-term cause is is the alliance system. And the alliance system, the nations of Europe are going to sign treaties of support with each other, that if they were facing attacks from other nations, they would get support from these other countries saying, I side with you and I will help you against your enemies. Now, that's kind of a good idea, but not really. There are two major alliances that are going to cause problems and that lead into the Great War. The first is the Triple Entente, and Entente is a French word, so the Triple Entente is going to include France. It also is going to include Great Britain and Russia. So you've got France and Great Britain, who has the strongest navy, and Russia. Now, this is a very weak alliance because these three countries really don't like each other. They really don't have much in common with each other. And so there's not a whole lot of trust between them as will this person uphold their end of the bargain. So that's going to cause an issue later. The second major alliance is the Triple Alliance. And we got three countries in this one too. You have Germany, which remember has the strongest military, the strongest army. You had Austria-Hungary and Italy. So Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Now this alliance is very, very strong because these three countries have a lot in common. They trust each other and they don't think that they're gonna back out of it. They know that they can rely on each other. Now, what makes this interesting is that Russia is going to sign a separate peace treaty with Serbia. What is Serbia? Well, we'll get into Serbia in just a little bit. But Russia signs a separate treaty. Now, France and Great Britain not happy about it, but nothing they can do. So they sign a separate peace treaty with Serbia. Now, nobody wants to disturb this balance of power. Nobody wants to tip the scales. But eventually something is going to happen. And we get this powder keg. And a powder keg, if you ever seen pirates with their big powder kegs and it explodes and blows the whole ship up, kind of thing. On June 28th, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo. Sarajevo is in Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary had control of Serbia. Serbia was this little tiny nation in the middle of Austria-Hungary that they had taken over. Now remember, Russia had signed a separate peace treaty with Serbia. So that's going to cause some issues. But Austria-Hungary is in charge of it at this point. And Austria-Hungary has a dual monarchy. So you have two kings in charge of Austria-Hungary. You have an Austrian king and a Hungarian king. And the heir to the throne, which is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, decides he's going to take a road trip to Sarajevo. Now, Sarajevo was in the middle of Austria-Hungary, but it's also in the middle of Serbia. So he decides he's going to take this road trip to Sarajevo. And he takes along his wife, Sofia, and they are going to travel to Sarajevo. And in Sarajevo, they're basically going to go on a tour of the city. But what they don't know is that Sarajevo is this powder keg. It is a hot spot in Europe because the Serbians do not want to be under the power of or under the control of Austria-Hungary. They want their freedom. They want their independence. Excuse me. So, anyway, so we get Archduke Franz Ferdinand going to travel to Sarajevo in the midst of people that hate him and don't like the Austria-Hungarians, don't want anything to do with them. But he and his wife are going to go travel in this open car. It's like an open limousine. And this assassin is waiting for them on the corner and kills them. He kills Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He also kills Sofia and their unborn child as well. And the assassin's name is Gavrilo Princip, and he's a 19-year-old. He's a member of this Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. And remember, nationalism is promoting your country. So he's a Serbian nationalist who's promoting Serbia and wants independence for Serbia, wants it away from Austria-Hungary. So that's why he's pissed off enough to kill people. So he gets involved and he kills Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And his goal was to unite all of Serbia under a Serbian government. And so he kills Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He's captured soon after. But this is the ignition. This is what's going to set off World War I, because the Austrians want revenge on the Serbians. So, July 28th, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, which they already had control of. They were just proving a point. So, they declare war on Serbia. Serbia is then going to say, oh crap, we didn't want this. And so they're going to call on their strongest ally for support. And their strongest ally is Russia. So, July 29th, Russia is going to mobilize to defend Serbia. Here's a problem, because remember, they're part of the Triple Entente with France and Great Britain. And France and Great Britain say, we don't want a part of this. We want nothing to do with this. So, Russia mobilizes to defend Serbia. They're going to go after Austria-Hungary. At this point, Austria-Hungary says, oh crap, we didn't want to take on Russia. We wanted to kick the crap out of Serbia, who we already had control of, so we're just trying to prove a point. We didn't want to take on Russia. So, Austria-Hungary is going to call on their strongest ally. So August 1st, Germany jumps in, and they declare war on Russia. At this point, Russia says, crap, we're taking on the strongest army in the world. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to beat the crap out of Austria-Hungary. And so they're going to call on their allies. And their allies say, you're on your own. Well, Germany, by August 3rd, says, never mind, we really don't want to take on Russia. We want France. Remember, going back to nationalism? France and Germany don't get along. They hate each other, fighting over this little piece of land called Alsace-Lorraine. So they declare war on France. Germany declares war on France. At this point, France says, what are you picking on us for? We said we didn't want a part of it. But Germany says, too bad. And so on August 4th, Germany is going to invade Belgium. Hopefully at this point everybody's going, what? Where did Belgium come from? Belgium came from nowhere, because Belgium was neutral. Belgium wasn't a part of anything. But Belgium was between Germany and France. And we're going to talk about that with the Schlieffen Plan. But at this point, August 4th, Great Britain declares war on Germany. Not because their allies, France and Russia, had been attacked and declared war on. Not because the Serbians needed help. But because Germany invades Belgium, which was a neutral country. And that was just something you didn't do. You don't invade neutral countries. When you invade neutral countries tend to band together and say, you can't do that. So Great Britain says, we were neutral, we backed out of it, you invaded a neutral country, which means you don't respect any neutrality. And violation of neutrality is not acceptable. So, why do the Germans go into Belgium? It's called the Schlieffen Plan. Now, this was created in 1905 by Count Alfred von Schlieffen. Remember, this is 1914 when this all takes place. So in 1905, 9 years prior to this, some dude's sitting back saying, okay, what happens if? And he comes up with this Schlieffen Plan. Basically, Count Alfred von Schlieffen says, if we ever get in a war, if Germany ever gets in a war with Russia, what are we going to do? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold Russia back. And then we're going to quickly attack France through Belgium, because they're not going to expect that. They're going to expect us to go right straight across the border. But that's not what we're going to do. We need to go through Belgium, because that's what they're not going to expect. We're not going to go to the south, because in the south is Switzerland, and Switzerland has the Alps, and that's really tall mountains that we don't want to cross. But Belgium is flat land, and we can get through that fast, attack France, take over Paris, France is no longer an issue for us. Great Britain will stay out of it, and we can go after Russia at that point. We can concentrate on Russia. France will no longer be an issue. So, back in 1905, he was hypothetically planning out World War I. Well, France and Great Britain were not able to save Belgium. Schlieffen was right on that account. They were not ready. They could not protect Belgium. And so eventually they will meet in France and they will retreat to the Marne River, and that's where the first battle will take place in September of 1914. And it's shortly thereafter that we get trench warfare established by the spring of 1915. And we're going to be talking about what trench warfare is and how that impacts this war and makes it so different from every other war previous.